Thanks especially to Doggin Days for the motivation for other Heroscapers to get their own tournament reports out there. His tournament overviews are my favorite of his videos, so figured it was time to get my own made. The format this time was Pick Your Poison, aka Delta Tripod Ban. Each player bought 3 pods of 260 points Delta, 10 figures with no hex limit, but no figure could be in more than one pod. Before each game, we had 5 minutes to secretly and simultaneously ban one of our opponent's pods, and then we fielded our own remaining 2 pods as one army. In short, we all brought 3 pods of 260 Delta points, 10 figures. The opponent banned one, and we played with the other 2. I had 2 different mindsets regarding building these pods. 1, make 3 strong, standalone pods that would not synergize at all with the other 2. Or 2, make 3 pods that synergized with the other 2 but would not be dependent on another pod. I.e., I wouldn't bring Green Scales in one and Nilfheim in another, or Arrowgruts in one and Swags in another. I also made several pods for a few first-timers and made them option 1. That way, no matter what was banned, they would have a decent army and not have to think too much. The pods themselves had varying levels of inner synergy or complexity, from ×3 Templar or ×3 Stingers Marku on the easy end, to Exiles, Knaves, Bakburna, and Dumatef on the more complex end. Here's a couple of the armies I provided for others. Hulusia, Killian, Vane III, Anshu, and Kita, Bakburna, Exiles, Knaves, and Dumatef, or Marl Stingers ×3 and Marku, or another army, Templar ×3, 10th Reg ×2 Guilty, Major Cutes 10, and Nigaxa. Here's some of the other armies I considered for myself. The pods in groups 1 through 5 all synergized with each other in some manner. I strongly considered the Ordo Concan Thorgrim pod with the Knights and Frostclaws, but after playtesting a few times and watching them in a few Sir H videos, the Ordo just always seemed to underperform, so I decided against them. And real quick, here's some of the other theory crafting I did with random pods, some of which showed up, but most of which did not. The army I decided to go with went as follows. The Knight pod, Knights ×2 and Finn. The Bear pod, Frostclaw Paladins, Alistair, and Isamu. And the Agent pod, Nikita Agents, Agent Skahen, Atanashi, and the Tarn Viking Warriors. The Knights and Frostclaws both bonded with Finn and Alistair, and when Finn died, he could boost either the Frostclaws or Alistair, usually the Bears. If pod 3, the Agent pod, was banned, the idea was to lead with Finn and the Knights, then when Finn died, boost the Bears and clean up with 4 attack Bears and Alistair. If either of the other pods was banned, I would lead Nikitas, then go melee, then clean up at the end with Skyhead. Game 1 was against Mana Sam on Smoldering Ashes by Shurig. Mana Sam is a store employee who jumps in whenever we need a player, in order to keep things even. This also means that this once-a-quarter tournament is the only time I believe he plays. And when we sat down, he actually wasn't sure what army he was running, as Ryan always provides it for him. The army he ended up running, though, was Pod 1, Omnicron Snipers ×3, Pod 2, Taylord and Tandros, and Pod 3, Abrian Archers ×3 and Guilty. I banned the Archers, as even a brand new player could get a crazy extended frenzy streak and wipe the board, and as hoped, he banned the Agent pod. I unfortunately didn't take any pictures of this match, but I'll walk through some of it on the picture of the map here. From what I remember, I led with Knights and Finn, and we traded Knights for Snipers for a while, mostly here and here. And he did eliminate most or all of the Knights, but then I cleaned up with Bears and Alistair, and that was the game. Game 2 was against Austin on the classic map Percolator by Ulysses. This game was on stream, so I was able to snag a few screenshots. Unfortunately, the edges are cut off, but it's better than nothing. His 3 pods were as follows. Pod 1, Templar Cavalry ×3. Pod 2, 10th Reg ×2 and Guilty. And Pod 3, Major Q10 and Nigaxa. You might recognize this from earlier in the stream. Austin banned the Knights and I banned the Templar, and the game commenced. I led off with Nikitas and he led with 10th. The 10th ended up wiping out the Nikitas while I only took out 1 or 2 10th, and I got very nervous having just lost a 120-point squad for almost nothing. I next brought out the Bears and Alistair. Austin is a very new player, probably only having played 2 to 3 games prior to this tournament, and he made one of the very common new player mistakes, which is leading with one unit, but then switching to another while the first is still at full strength. As while he still had plenty of 10th left, he started putting order markers on Q10, costing him at least one full turn of weight and fire attacks, some from height, and may have even put an order marker or 2 on guilty. These misplays allowed Alistair and the Bears to chew through Q10 and the 10th. It's a bit hard to tell from these pictures, but once I got through Q10, I was in his start zone and took out Guilty and started chewing on Negaxa. But wouldn't you know it, Negaxa mind shackled the Bears. So the 2 to 3 Bears I had left betrayed me, and Alistair didn't even see the mauling coming. Now faced with having to take out my remaining Bears and Negaxa, I turned to Agent Skahen. With 6 move, 7 range, double attack, I was able to kite around the board, eliminating the remaining Bears, and I turned to Negaxa. He got within 3 hexes of Skahen once, and I thought he had me cornered, but due to the 1 hex height in the water, I found one spot behind this tree where I was still just out of Negaxa's threat range. Due to not being able to get to Skahen, he decided to try to mind shackle the Tarn in the hopes of getting another lucky D20 and then a couple Berserker charges to finally catch Skahen, which under the circumstances was probably the best call. But a couple more shots from Skahen and a turn or 2 of attacks from the Tarn, Negaxa finally went down. So after that nerve-wracking game against Austin, I was 2-0, and next up was Big Krug Daddy, also on Percolator. Big Krug Daddy had the following pods: Krug times 1, Swog Rider times 2, Aerogruts times 2, Heavy Gruts times 2, Nirak, Dumatev, and Pod 3, Maro Stingers times 3, and Marku. I banned the Stingers, and he banned the Agents, and the game began. I won initiative and led Knights and Finn. At the end of my turn 3, I had 1 Knight on Wannock, just below off screen, which an Aerogrut immediately shot off, and I threw Finn way out in front here to get an early attack down on Nirak, which whiffed. This was likely my biggest mistake of the game, as on the next turn he swarmed Finn with heavies and eliminated him. I had not fully thought through a fundamental aspect of Heroscape, which is that attack dice are better than defense dice. Even if Finn had eliminated Nirak and then was swarmed and taken out, Finn was only able to attack once and never boosted the Knights with his adjacency attack bonus. Therefore, I lost many potential extra attack dice from more attacks from Finn and from that agency bonus. Much better would have been to hold Finn back here with the Knights so he could boost them, and then if he was still alive after most of the Knights were eliminated, suicide him forward to get the boost to the Bears. The next couple rounds were trading Knights into Heavies, but with his Nirak boosted Heavies having the same attack and defense as my Knights, getting the benefit of greater movement and disengage, he was able to outmaneuver me and took out the majority of the Knights. I then moved to the Bears-Alistair duo, but after another big whiff from Alistair down on Nirak, the Bears and Alistair were eventually able to finish off Nirak in the Heavies, so the Bears turned to the Aerogruts. Within a couple turns, I eliminated most of the Aerogruts, but he retreated a few back to his start zone and had this nice choke point between the 2 water sections, where a few swarms were able to hide behind a swag and take boosted shots. This swag was the MVP of the game, as he absorbed or I whiffed at least 3 attacks, 2 of them being full attacks of 4 from the Bears, preventing me from finishing off the last of the arrows, and not having anything like enough to take on the full life Krug he still had. I forfeited. At this point, I had maybe 1.5 Bears, a Knight, and a Samu left against his full life Krug and Dumatev. And while a Samu can do crazy things, at this point there wasn't much time left in the round, so I figured it wasn't worth dragging it out. So going into game 4, I was 2-1. Another big mistake I made going into this game was banning the Stingers instead of the Heavy Gruts. While the Stingers are a very strong pod, there's still only 3 activations, comparing to the 5 of the Heavy Gruts in Nirak. Plus, with the Heavy Gruts having disengage, they can completely dance around the Knights and completely nullify the Coward's reward. So if I had banned the Heavy Gruts, he would have had fewer activations, and I would have actually been able to lock down the Stingers once the Knights caught up to him. The last game of the tournament was against Two Tongues, or Josh. Josh's army went as follows. Pod 1, Spiders times 2, Estavara, Wyvern, and Atanashi. Pod 2, Venoch Vipers times 2, Venoch Warlord, and Zeta. In Pod 3, Mohican River Tribe times 3, and Brave Arrow. I banned his Mohicans to cut out the majority of his range, and I'm also much less experienced playing against them, and he banned the agents, and the game commenced. I only took one picture of this game, showing how we set up in the start zones, but it will be a good guide. The glyph on the right side of the board is the move glyph. So on order marker 2, Finn was on it, boosting my knights to 6 move. He brought out Zetakron and set it up here between these two trees and took a couple shots, but most of his order markers were spent on the Spiders and Wyvern. I was able to get adjacent to Wyvern on this height here in the middle of the board, and Josh, not wanting to risk a coward's reward, didn't move the Wyvern for the rest of the game. His Spiders really clogged up the middle of the board between the trees, so my movement and attacks were not always optimal. And once my knights were all moved up, I brought Finn into the frame. I don't remember how many, if any, of the knights were left, but between the Spiders, Wyvern, and Zeta, they cleared out the knights and Finn. But then the boosted Bears and Alistair were able to clean up any remaining Spiders and the 0 defense Vipers. In the end, Big Krug Daddy went 4-0 and placed first. 3 of us went 3-1. SOS placed me in 4th. Here's everyone who went 3-1 or better in their armies. Big thanks goes to Ryan or Ryguy for another great tournament. By the time this video was made, we already had another tournament, a store championship, so hopefully that one will get out before too long.